Three, two, one, liftoff.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.
Jonathan, what's going on? Welcome to the podcast. It's nice to see you.
Thanks, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Yes. Before we get started and talking about your role as Vice President of Market Development with LeafyPack, and jumping into the whole world of automation in the cannabis industry, I first want to allow the audience to get a sense of your background, who you are, Jonathan. And when I was looking at your bio, it made me think of like, it could be like a country song, from weed to wheat. And of course, a lot of the listeners probably don't know what any of that means. So why don't you kind of just give everyone some context as to what I'm talking about when I say wheat to weed?
Yeah. It's a long story, but I'll make it as abridged for folks. I'm from Montana. My mom and her family are fourth generation wheat farmers. And so we have some substantial acreage out in eastern Montana, out in Wolf Point. And I grew up, running combines and playing in the back of grain trucks. From a childhood, that was our summer camp. And then, obviously moved on from that as I grew older and got into, school, and I've done everything from working in the outdoor industry for companies like Sitka and Sims for the outdoors folks out there. Worked as a regional director for Marriott, did some ERP work, and then got into cannabis pretty early on in the hemp days with one of the first direct lenders supporting hemp particle processing systems. So looking at hemp decortication systems and creating particle board and fiber. And then flash forward a number of years later, I was an early adopter and financing LeafyPack's packaging equipment as that became more and more relevant and necessary. Got out of the lending space and joined Alan and the team to really expand upon the automation side of packaging exclusively in the cannabis space. So it's really from being out on the farm picking rock all the way to automating systems in the niche agriculture market that is cannabis these days.
That's so awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you've truly kind of seen and lived it all, right? As this industry continues to evolve. And before we jump into automation, I'm curious. You mentioned your position, within the hemp industry and the decortication, and that must have been a really niche kind of segment or role that you were playing in that time, because even now the infrastructure for decortication in hemp is like far and in between, right? I mean, it's not really apparent. It still needs to grow. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sure, no pun intended. I always kind of imagine that in a parallel universe, in the multiverse of cannabis, there's a world where construction material and fabric and that side of hemp really takes off. And I hope that one day it still gets there. There's a ton of benefits from hemp being incorporated into construction material, whether it's the antimicrobial factors or anti-mold, as well as just the structural integrity that it brings. But there's a lot of bureaucracy. I'm sure anyone who's done construction build outs or anything knows that there's a lot of regulations around what product you can use, and I really hope we get there one day. But we were actually looking to buy hemp decortication systems ourselves and create the fiber, and we could not find any sort of financing. And this is back in 2016. And we decided, my cousin decided to, hey, let's go out and find and raise the capital to help support other folks who are actually trying to do this. Like one problem led to another problem, which led to a separate solution than where we started, which I think that's how a lot of people end up in this industry, and eventually settle down in whichever vertical they decide that best fits what their skill set can add value.
Right, right. Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point that I didn't really even consider. And I always thought that the issue was like the capital it would take to create infrastructure for decortication and to get that process done. But what it sounds like you're saying, it's that plus like the regulation of even applying the materials that you would produce from hemp because they're not within regulation or code. And then even just the financing side of like, I guess, getting capital to build these out.
Yeah, and again, I'm not a general contractor, so I know it's I don't want to dive too down that rabbit hole, but like for instance, in different states and depending on what you're building and who you're building it for, sometimes they'll say, hey, you need to use galvanized or nails and somewhere else, and so there's in order to incorporate those things, there's a lot of lobbying going on behind the scenes at state, county levels to meet building codes, which I think is incredibly important, especially with seeing some of the storms. We have a facility out in Tampa, which was fortunately not affected by the recent hurricanes there. But so I think that's just one hurdle. We always think of ingesting products when we're talking about cannabis generally, and THC specifically. But when it comes to like construction materials and things like that, there's a whole separate, I guess, hurdles and barriers that people have to overcome to utilize those sorts of things. It's not like you're using it for shirts or something like that. These buildings need to withstand varying degrees of scrutiny and also just environmental hazards. And so one day, I certainly hope that we could utilize the whole plant better. And just where hemp and CBD is at today, I think there's a lot of really great groups doing a lot of incredible work out there. And I really hope that hemp and CBD really gets like a second coming, because I think there's really some great use cases for the plant and also the extracts that come from it as well.
I'm totally with you. Yeah, I mean, within the hemp plant, there is no waste. So, well, let's dig into it. First I want to talk about, how standardization is occurring through automation in the cannabis industry. So talk to me about how automation is reshaping cannabis operations and even the consumer experience.
Yeah. That's a big
The
question.
loaded
And
question. Yeah. We can
yeah.
start with
How,
operations. How is it reshaping cannabis
yeah.
operations?
Yeah, so we're talking about automation, right? And I can only speak primarily on the automation of the packaging side. And when you start looking at standardization, it's easy to go straight to like the MSOs, right? They purchase licenses and buildings or lease buildings from pre-existing tenants, and not all buildings are designed the same. Some are very fortunate to be able to build to spec from the ground up and accommodate for what they did in New York, they could replicate in Florida. That's just not the world we live in. The facility in Pennsylvania, maybe it's fully equipped from the ground up with state of the art infrastructure. And the same brand and same company goes and expands in Illinois, right? And that building is not the same. The laws, the regulating bodies that are in Illinois are not the same, or under the same scrutiny that maybe they're dealing with in Pennsylvania, and vice versa. And so along with that comes the inability to just replicate exactly what they did over there. You might not have control of the building, but you can start to look at the workflow processes that are involved in that, right? And every market has different labor to pull from, different skill sets to pull from. And so really, like for those groups, it's more about how do we sell a consistent product in one state and package it in one state, but we actually can't ship that product cross state lines. And so when it comes to automation, really pushing forward or pushing the needle for standardization, one thing we can do is we can build machinery that will simulate, depending on the floor space, the same level of throughput, quality, and also just design the ethos without having to reinvent the wheel and go out and find people that can follow that exact SOP They can take a system like what LeafyPack offers, like a roto bag or eco bagger, depending on the throughput needs, because every state's got a different volume and different supply and demand. So, just because you're automating a bagger, you might not need the same one. So what we can do is come in with our engineering team and say, okay, this is what we can work with here. This is what you guys can alter. How do we create that same experience that we're having in PA in a totally different environment in Illinois? And that's really where automation, and that's even before, if you go outside of packaging, automating your depositing lines, automating your ovens, your recipes, like really standardizing so that people have a uniform experience under one brand, but with that hindrance that they can't ship that product cross state lines. So you really got to simulate, emulate, and then with intent, create an automation plan so that your products in Illinois are the same that they are in Pennsylvania. Just an example.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. I mean, improved consistency, efficiency, and in compliance, it's critical, right? Especially within the cannabis space and of businesses of all sizes. Um, so tell me a little bit about, how it's also helping businesses meet the increasing demand while addressing labor shortages or even rising operational costs.
Yeah, another humdinger. I love it. Great questions, Kevin. So I would reframe your question a little bit because you're talking about labor shortages, and that's a whole thing to unpack. But no pun intended, but we'll bundle these together.
Yeah.
You're talking about increase in demand, but also you're talking about a very, I think, toxic price fluctuation, right? Like we saw what just happened in Florida, where a lot of companies were betting on a huge influx of capital, new consumers to the market, and that didn't happen. And Florida's not just the only one that's dealt with that, right? Michigan had some serious price fluctuations. And so everyone's trying to figure out, hey, how do we make this a more sustainable business model? One of those things is that labor component. I wish that we even lived in a world where you could find 20 people to pay to do a job. So when people say labor shortage, it's the bodies are there and people are there and capable. They just don't want to do that work anymore. And time again, we've seen that. And the turnover is just, it really creates those inconsistencies across the board. And the cost of onboarding people is something that I think people, they always think about how much you're paying somebody per hour. But the time and investment and capital you put into bringing somebody on board only to have them for 2 months before they leave, and then that directly impacts your ability to deliver products. These things are all intertwined. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about automating, you're really bringing in new technology. You can take some of your highest quality people who've really stuck around and proven time and time again that they're quality and give them a growth path within the company, while meeting those new demands, which those demands, while they can, increase, a lot of times people will have a set pool that they can pull from, and you're really trying to either pull from your competition, have people, hey, why your product over someone else's product? And being price competitive is important, but in order to continue to grow your business, you need to control those margins, right? And when you're talking about automation, that's really what it does. You're automating your process line so that, the price, regardless of those extreme fluctuations, that you can lower your cost of goods to get it out the door at a reasonable price, at a throughput that supports that demand, so you can supply the market and meet that and even exceed it, but also have the ability to, again, sustainable growth model within your business. You're promoting people, teaching them new technology, and then eventually they're going to continue to grow that way. But, when you start seeing prices plummet in states, we've seen it go up and then down countless times. If you're not looking at that bottom line and anticipating those price fluctuations, if you're doing one thing one way and the price is here, and then 3 months later, the price is here, all of a sudden now your entire business is upside down. Right. And so the consistency that automation brings, I think, really does more than just meet demand and throughput speeds, but you're actually creating a foundation for a sustainable business model in a very unstable industry right now still.
Right. Yeah. You're basically becoming more predictable with your operations, like you said, in a very chaotic, hectic market that is continually evolving, changing, fluctuating every day. Right.
Yeah, you're trying to create stability in a storm, and automating is one part of that, but also, like I said, keep those people who have been, assets to the company. We're not replacing jobs. We're also creating opportunity for those who have been loyal to the company, and offering a growth path through learning how to be an operator on some really incredible equipment.
Yeah. I mean, so I want to switch gears just a bit and talk about now like the real world impact, let's say specifically as it relates to packing automation. So, can you give me some examples of how packing automation systems have improved operational efficiency for cannabis businesses, even like from small scale operators to large enterprises, the MSOs of the world, etc.?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit, and so I'll try not to tread over the same ground again. I think switching over to some
More
of the
example,
smaller
we'll
groups.
welcome more examples too. I mean,
No, I think it's really good though, because I think this is, and I don't want to digress off it too much, but real world examples of how automating packaging equipment has really changed people's business and how they see things.
yeah.
We were working with out in Massachusetts, and this was pretty early on, and they didn't need a whole automated, fully turnkey, 6 units combined, transformer of a system. They just the market didn't need it. They had a small operation, and it was doing fine. And one thing that we went in and assessed their business, and they were like, hey, well, we have rigid containers, and we also have bags, and we also have like some of these other die cut, like cute design bags and stuff. And all of that to automate fully is can be 200, 300, 500,000, depending on how far you want to go. And that's just like, it's not realistic. And so we go in as more consultative, sorry, and we came up with just a small semi-automatic system. Start with what part of the process takes up the most time, and that for them was weighing the product, taking it, and I don't know if you've ever weighed something. Like, I grew up in some backcountry kitchens out here in Montana when I was like 15, 16 years old. And it's that act where you pick up the product, you put it onto a scale, you take your hands off, you wait for the scale, and then you got to add a little bit. Oh, too much, got to take some off.
Mhm.
Perfect. And people get good at that. There's people who are like really good at eyeballing it, but all nugs are not the same size, so it's really hard to, like, it's not sliced turkey or something.
Right. Some are more
It was
dense than
very time
others. Yeah.
different strains, all those things. But that one thing alone was so time intensive. And we go, hey, for a very reasonable price, under $100,000, we can get you a multi-head weigher, NTEP certified, which means it's like incredibly accurate, third-party scrutiny under it, and certified. And we'll just put a foot pedal. And that way, if you've got your container, you put your container under it, hit the foot pedal. If you got your bags, you just put them under it, hit your foot pedal. And then as you develop, we can grow with you. And they're like, well, wait a minute, don't I need the bagger and all these other things? We go, no, we'll talk, we can deal with that down the road. The other thing that they brought up is like, well, do we have to buy a whole new weigher? And we go, no. See, the nice thing is that we can scale this with you. So once you're done hitting that foot pedal and you've locked in more of what you're looking for from a packaging format, whether it's, jars or rigid containers like plastic containers, or it's pouches, we can cross that bridge when we get there and use that same multi-head and put it over a bagger or an indexing line and start to fully automate it. And so I think one thing that they noticed is that once they got that semi-auto weigher foot pedal, other partners, it's a close-knit community, were like, hey, do you mind packaging for us also? Like, do you mind, like, well, like, a lot of this industry is handshakes and
It's a new
and
line
still
of
is.
business that opened. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it opened up a whole new revenue stream. And instead of getting another automated bagging line, they really liked the flexibility of that semi-auto system. And they ended up getting another one. And these things are not that big. They're maybe, 9 feet tall, but they're only, about I don't know, let's say 4 feet by 4 feet at most. And they found it very useful to have that flexibility to kind of put whatever package underneath it and hit a foot pedal. And that turned into a whole new business line. Like I discussed earlier, we get into this industry for one thing, and all of a sudden now they're like, wow, we're like a solid co-packing partner helping out these other guys in the same state as us. And that totally changed their business trajectory, opened up new revenue channels, new value adds, and now they're, hiring people for marketing a whole new product line they just never thought like they were going to ever be in, And so that's on a small scale, but with those ripple effects, I think it really changes both their business, but also the people that they're sharing this space with, especially, in that specific state, which is where we're confined, in individual silos. They could actually make a real impact on their, local cannabis community by investing in automation. So it's not just my product and what I'm doing for me. It's like it actually opens up opportunities for collaboration, working together and solving other people's problems that they're facing. And all ships rise at high tide. So I think that's kind of a cool, maybe atypical story as opposed to the usual, oh yeah, it's, increasing efficiency and throughput. It's like, well, actually there's other really nice benefits that I think are overshadowed in this space that automation can bring to the table.
Very cool story. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you sharing that. That's really what I was looking for. All right, and so one more thing I wanted to ask you, as it relates to the impact of packaging automation, is how it basically helps companies comply with the regulations that are out there, right? Is there any kind of examples that you can give from LeafyPack's perspective, or just things you've seen in general about how automation is helping in that area?
Yeah, and again, there's a whole nother conversation to have about the actual production equipment, right? Like, depositors and the food sciences of it all, especially with gummies and the growing up. But when it comes to packaging, it would be a beautiful world if, they said, hey, this is the packaging requirements, and it just never changed. That would be a wonderful world to exist in. Unfortunately, that's not the one we live in, right? Turnover in politics, specifically local politics, somebody comes in and goes, wait a minute, now we can't have strawberries on the front of packaging because it depicts fruit, and that's just unacceptable. And all of a sudden now, the team has to come up with a whole nother way to promote their product without, having a strawberry on front of their strawberry flavored gummies or something, right? And so there's always you're always trying to stay ahead of it and be able to accommodate these new regulations that are coming down the line. And so for us, a lot of it is customers, and clients and our partners, they'll come to us and go, hey, look, we got to notice that we're going to have to start doing it this way. Like, for instance, in some places, people are, starting to wrap individual edibles. And then but because that individual wrap is not, child resistant, it then needs to be put into another, like a secondary package that maybe has, CR zippers or, specified millimeters of thickness or material or, whatever that might be, right? And so a lot of our clients are kind of the ones who push our innovation forward, because then now we go, okay, wait a minute. Let's sit down and come up with a system like, okay, let's get a flow wrapper that can specifically handle sticky products. And a flow wrapper, if you think like a Snickers bar, or when you go to a restaurant, there's little mints individually packaged, right?
Yeah.
So now they're like, hey, that adds a whole new package to our line that is required by the state. And I'm just giving an example here.
Right.
So all of a sudden it's like, okay, so let's get that new flow wrapper into the production line. And now let's create a custom, conveyor feeding system to go into the pre-existing bagger that you might already have, right? And understand how we can incorporate this new regulatory body coming in, changing what your packaging format entirely looks like. And then how do we integrate and implement that into an existing workflow process that a company's already made, previous to the previous groups that were telling them what to do. And that's something that we can work with the company on, especially with our in-house engineers and design team. But the other interesting thing is the consumer side of it, right? And this is something I'm seeing a lot in like the vape space, which is, they'll be in a box maybe. So there'll be a box and there'll be super nice marketing and really pretty. And then you open the box and there's like a gray, pull tab, flexible film metallic thing that has zero advertisement or zero marketing into it. It's just like a generic gray package. And that goes in that both of those things go straight in the trash, right? And then the vape itself looks really nice and pretty. And so people have gotten creative around the marketing aspect of this and how do we automate those lines? Because as you start to add packaging to keep the product and brand integrity alive while meeting regulations, I think is a challenge specifically to cannabis, right? Because at the end of the day, when the customer sees the product, that's point number one. By the time they're walking out the door, they don't really care about what's in that child-resistant package. It doesn't always need to be pretty. It's there for protection and it's there for safety, and it doesn't always need to be the pretty part. So how does the user experience at the end meet their first touch point? And how do you make that middle, child-resistant portion of it as safe and protective as it needs to be, without making it as obtrusive, right? Like you're not going to keep eating gummies out of a bag and you got to keep opening that CR zipper every time. Your fingers are going to be rubbed raw. So how do you make it child resistant, but how do you make that end user experience, the one that people really want? And so that adds cost, right? Having a cartoner, having the film to do the child resistant, and then to ultimately have, the vape, and that takes a whole nother automation of filling those. But that all costs a lot of money. So automating it, again, controlling those margins as regulations change. A lot of that CR stuff is incredibly expensive to begin with. And as you add more layers, the cost increases. So you got to find ways to control those costs. And automation is just like, that is what it is made for. That is how people have maintained their margins, kept the cost affordable for the consumer and them, and also giving the client that first touch point experience and also the user experience with as little friction in between as possible, while still staying compliant and keeping people safe and making sure that people are protected that shouldn't have access to it. I guess it's my most PC PR answer I can give, but that's a deep question. I think a lot of people are are still working through that.
It's a good answer, and it is deep. My mind is like running everywhere because I mean my first thing is to go to like problem solving, right? And so when you talk about these challenges both at like the operator level where hey, new regulations on packaging come in, hey, figure it out, right? So that you can keep your margin, keep everything kind of sustainable. But then I didn't even think about on the consumer side. You're so right. There has to be that fine balance of protection for children, yet the experience of opening and accessing the product. And it sounds like it's not fully like it's continuing to evolve, and part of that is because the packaging is constantly changing within these various states, right?
Exactly. And not to be a shell for the company I work for, but for instance, another great example, and I'll make this one brief because it's very specific, and I think everyone's seen this, so it's very relatable, is the pre-rolls, right? So the marketing on the hard doob tube, as a lot of people call it, like the hard doob tube has really cool marketing. It's a pop top, or like I know Calix has some really cool like sealed ones that are pretty slick. But those containers oftentimes need to be in like a CR pouch, like a skinny, tall CR pouch, because the original, pop top is not child resistant. But that pop top is generally like, again, from Montana, go skiing and stuff. That hard container is what I'm throwing in my ski backpack, and it's keeping the pre-roll safe or whatever. The child resistant pouch, by the time I walk out the door, there's usually always a trash can right by the door, and I just rip that thing, take the doob tube out, and immediately throw that thing in the trash.
Same. Yeah,
And
same.
so, yeah, and so they're getting around it. And so, for instance, for us, like at MJ BizCon, we had really cool this year, and again, industry-born kind of solution is like this 4x7 little auto bagger where you just place the vape or the pre-roll on a nice little conveyor it's all in one unit, will go up and just drop the doob tube or the joint or the vape into a nice little bagger, seal it up, and get it out the door quickly. Because again, people, you're in compliance, you're being compliant with the child resistant, but most people just want that doob tube. That's like what's protecting it. That's the marketing and everything. And that's
Portable,
the
it's
end.
mobile, it's easy to use. Yeah.
So anyways, that's a side tangent, but that's a very prevalent one about CR versus non-CR, and the user experience versus the buying experience. Two very different things.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't think of this stuff, like I said, so I appreciate you sharing those real world examples. I want to get specific now on LeafyPack and talk about its lease to own program, right? I mean, obviously, cannabis operators face the challenge of raising or accessing capital. Um, Traditional financing solutions typically fall short. So, talk to me about this lease to own program and how it benefits these operators.
Yeah, the super riveting part. We went from packaging to financing, the most two exciting, sexy topics on the planet. Um, and again, I'll make this part pretty quick because I think it's show not tell. So come to our booth at the trade show and our partners. But this specific lease to own program, it's more of an all-inclusive packaging and automation program. We partnered with one of the most established flexible film companies, with KindPack, and the issue we ran into is that our equipment, oftentimes the efficiency of it is directly related to the product, and then the packaging, right? If the packaging, in order to automate, there's things you need to understand about the actual package itself. And in this space, people are always entering the industry when a new state comes online. And it's kind of like Groundhog's Day, where they're like, hey, what film supplier should I talk to? Like, where should I get my packaging? And it's very difficult for us to recommend a business when there's 30,000-40,000 different film suppliers in the world, all vying for attention. And so for us, it's very important for us to it was very important for us to reach out and meet with really high quality partners. We've worked with Calix on the rigid packaging side, but then with KindPack, we really wanted to take it to the next level. And what we're doing with them is, show us your throughput, show us your packaging that you're using now. And what KindPack's doing is they are supplying all your flexible film packaging needs, and LeafyPack is supplying the equipment through them for one monthly payment. So it's kind of like if, and I know people don't love their internet providers, but out here in Montana, our internet provider does not create the modem. They don't make the modem. They give you the modem, you pay for the monthly service to get the internet. It's very similar to that in a less predatory way, which is, they have a full in-house graphic design team. They've got certifications globally. So anywhere you're at in the world, they can help you out with any of your flexible film packaging. And as long as you're, going through them for the pouches or roll stock film, the equipment is more or less, quote unquote, free. So there's not a standard underwriting procedure. You're not paying interest on one program for the machine and then also buying your film over here. That's something where a lot of people, and financing, myself included, I used to pitch that all the time, where I'm like, hey, well, the machine costs $200,000. We'll finance it over 24 months at cannabis rates or something, 10 to 15% or whatnot, out there. But you still got to buy the packaging. And if you buy the equipment and the packaging doesn't work on the equipment, then all of a sudden now you're paying for equipment and now you're scrambling to find the right packaging. All of KindPack's models have been validated for us, so we communicate with them. So if the customer and the client is talking to KindPack about packaging, we're brought into that conversation immediately so we can verify and validate exactly which machine will work best for them. So we're taking a lot of that discovery, which sounds fun but isn't in business, taking a lot of that discovery out of the equation and just creating an all-inclusive, like, hey, here's your pouches, here's your pouch machine with the weigher, with the conveyor, the whole kit and caboodle all together at one monthly payment. And we're seeing a lot of really good reception. I would say we'll have one of our smaller systems at the KindPack booth at MJBizCon. We will have information at our booth on this program. I really think that this is an incredible way for people to get into automation, whether it's semi-auto, like I discussed, that is still viable for this program, or if it's high-speed, full-line packaging, solutions with like our roto bagger or something. This is a way for people to just get in, oftentimes at zero down, and get their packaging and the equipment all at one single price that really fits what their throughput needs are, as opposed to finance and equipment. Now go find a supplier to also buy that packaging as well. So it's not just a normal. I think it's a little atypical, but I think it's something that this industry needs, and it's provided in other industries as well. I just don't think anyone in this space had thought about it yet.
Yeah. It sounds like it. I mean, I love the fact that while it can be probably time consuming and, the fact that you're so hands-on with the client to really understand what equipment they need, right? Like you have to be there. You have to be part of those discussions. If not, it's kind of like the whole process is broken, and things can kind of go out of whack, right?
Yeah, and I wish I could say that all of our systems were, this one, hey, it's got four wheels, it drives. But most of our equipment, there's certain requirements that people need, and there's form factors, and a lot of our equipment is custom for the client's specific packaging, pouches, size, dimensions, if they're co-packing, if they're not co-packing. I mean, that's why we have to have a full design team and engineering team, and those guys are like really the unsung heroes of all of this. And on the front end, on the business side, it's like, hey, how do we make this easier? Because again, there's no other industry where every year, like a new whole state comes online for an industry that was never there, and actually, matter of fact, illicitly illegal, and that's just not normal. So for LeafyPack and for the betterment of the cannabis space, it's like, how do we create a trusted ecosystem of complementary and I think complementary manufacturers, partners, ancillary services, and how do we create this really nice ecosystem, which is why we're really strong in our partnerships, is because we really need to shepherd this industry forward and create a safe environment for folks to come in what is a very, I think, still toxic industry. There's still a lot of bad actors out there, and LeafyPack being here and the people we partner with, I think is, I hope it's bettering the space and allowing for better acclimation to what is a pretty wild industry still.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Jonathan, I mean, we've really covered a lot. I'm glad that you mentioned that, you'll have a booth presence at MJBizCon coming up. So definitely encourage people attending to check y'all out and to learn more about LeafyPack. But as we wrap up, man, I want to just give you the floor. Is there any specific topics that we didn't cover or something that you'd like to highlight?
I would like to highlight something. It sounds a little boastful, but I think it shows our dedication space. The guys at Cannabis and Tech Today did their Canatech Innovation Awards. LeafyPack was one of many winners.
Congratulations!
Us specifically in our pack. Thank you. It's huge. Again, it's really the team in the back. It was for our roto bagger in the innovation space, and we're just grateful to be beside a lot of other incredible companies in that space. If you want to see what we're about, we're at booth 2413. We'll actually be there with one of our partners, EvoCan. They've got a really amazing depositor system that's doing 100 drops at a time, which is doing like 75,000 an hour. We've got that EcoVape, which is a new system that we're going to be showing there. But also go online. We have a really great video series of the Anti-Hand Packing Club, which we get testimonials from our clients, and they walk us through how automation has helped and support them. We've got a great social media presence. Our marketing team. We've got some really cool swag this year, debuting a really fun caricature bud box. But just come down, come visit, give us a shout. We're always happy to. Again, a lot of this is consultative, so give me a call, and we'd love to help out anybody. But no, Kevin, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love the podcast. I'm just really, really grateful to be part of it.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Jonathan. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Appreciate all the education that you provided to myself and the audience today, and look forward to seeing what LeafyPack continues to do in terms of disrupting the cannabis industry through automation, man. So thank you so much, and we'd love to have you on again real soon.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you all for listening. Bye.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.